You probably couldn't guess what song this is. See what I'm saying?
Natalie Cole, the daughter of Nat King Cole, one of the smoothest voices to ever bless a microphone. You'd think that being born into that kind of legacy would guarantee her a life of easy fame, non-stop applause, red carpets forever. But nah, it wasn't like that. Not even close. Natalie's story is wild, man. It's got everything: the glow of success, the shadows of addiction, the fight for survival, and that bittersweet question that just won't go away: why was she always underrated? From the jump, Natalie had this crazy gift, a voice that could glide from soulful R&B to tender jazz like silk sliding off your skin. When she hit the stage, it wasn't just singing, it was storytelling. She didn't just carry her father's bloodline, she carried his spirit. But here's the twist. While people expected her to be Nat King Cole's daughter, she wanted to be Natalie, her own person, her own legend. And the world? Man, the world wasn't always ready for that. She soared to the top with songs that made you feel like you were in love even when you weren't. She won Grammys, she had platinum records, she did things that should have put her on the same level as Aretha, Whitney, or Diana. But at the same time, she was battling demons that nearly swallowed her whole. Drugs, heartbreak, illness. Natalie went through it all. And somehow, she still stood tall enough to give us unforgettable, that haunting, magical duet across time with her father. So here's the real question. How can someone this powerful, this important to music, still feel like an underrated story? Well, y'all, let's find out together. Let's dive into her story right now. Natalie Maria Cole was born on the 6th of February, 1950, in Los Angeles, California, straight into a world of lights, cameras, and expectations. Her father, Nat King Cole, wasn't just a singer, he was the singer. Smooth voice, Hollywood charm, the man who broke barriers in music and on television. Her mother, Maria Cole, was a jazz singer too, part of Duke Ellington's circle. So yeah, music ran in her veins before she could even talk. From day one, Natalie wasn't just somebody's kid. She was that kid, the daughter of a legend. Now, you'd think growing up in the Cole household was all mansions and fairy tales. And don't get it twisted, she had luxury big houses, famous visitors, a father whose voice was on every radio station. But man, underneath that shine, Natalie faced real struggles. Imagine being a little girl and the whole world already deciding who you're supposed to be. That pressure was heavy, y'all. And let's not forget, this was the 1,950 inches America. Even though Nat King Cole was a superstar, racism was still loud and ugly. The Cole family moved into an all-white neighborhood in Los Angeles, and guess what? They were met with hostility, rocks thrown at their house, nasty words, neighbors who didn't want them there. That's the kind of world Natalie was growing up in, rich and famous, but still fighting prejudice. And then, the shadow of her father loomed so large. Nat King Cole was adored by millions, but at home, he was battling lung cancer. When Natalie was just 15 years old, her father passed away in 1965. Losing him wasn't just losing a parent, it was losing her anchor, her biggest inspiration. That grief shaped her deeply. Natalie once said that his death left a hole in her heart she never fully healed. But through the sadness, there was music, always music. As a child, she sang in church choirs and neighborhood performances. By the time she was a teenager, she had this natural gift, a voice that sounded mature, way beyond her years. She grew up listening to not just her father's jazz, but also the soul and R&B records of the day, artists like Aretha Franklin, Ray Charles, and Motown's best. That mix of influences brewed something special in her style. College was a turning point. Natalie attended the University of Massachusetts Amherst, studying child psychology. But man, even while studying, she couldn't stay away from music. She sang with small bands on campus, performing in clubs, cutting her teeth on stage the way true artists do. By then, it was clear. She wasn't just Nat's daughter. She had the chops, the drive, the soul. Yet even in those early days, Natalie felt that burden. People in the industry didn't see her as Natalie. They saw her as the next Nat King Cole. That's a tough role for any kid. Imagine trying to carve your own lane when the world only wants you to repeat your parents' greatness. But Natalie? She was stubborn in the best way. She didn't want to just cover her dad's songs. She wanted her own hits, her own style. She wanted to be remembered not as Nat King Cole's daughter, but as Natalie Cole, the star. Her early life was a mix of blessings and burdens, luxury and prejudice, fame and loneliness, talent and expectation. And that cocktail of experiences, it set the stage for the woman she would become. Strong, fiery, sometimes troubled, but always unforgettable. Because here's the thing, y'all. Even from her earliest years, Natalie Cole wasn't just living in her father's shadow. She was learning how to shine her own light. And that light was about to blaze across the music industry in ways nobody saw coming. So picture this. It's the early 1970. The music world is buzzing, Motown is running the charts, funk is exploding, disco is heating up. And here comes Natalie Cole, fresh out of college, stepping into the game. At first, the industry didn't quite know what to do with her. A lot of execs just wanted her to sing her dad's songs, stay in that safe lane of jazz standards. But Natalie, nah, she wasn't having it. She wanted to carve out her own voice, her own identity, her own space in music. She linked up with producers Chuck Jackson and Marvin Yancey, and that partnership changed everything. In 1975, Natalie dropped her debut album, Inseparable. Man, talk about making an entrance. The record gave us two instant classics, Inseparable and This Will Be an Everlasting Love. That second one, whew, still a jam today. You hear that song in commercials, movies, weddings, it's timeless. Natalie's voice was like sunshine dipped in honey, playful yet powerful, full of joy but with that bite of soul that made you stop and listen. And yo, the industry noticed. Natalie won the Grammy for Best New Artist in 1976, beating out some stiff competition. Think about that, the daughter of Nat King Cole, stepping up with her own sound, her own hits, and snatching up trophies right out the gate. That was her saying, I'm here, and I'm not just living off my daddy's name. The rest of the 70 seconds kept that momentum going. She dropped album after album. Natalie, unpredictable, thankful. She was a machine, cranking out music that blended R&B, soul, and just a little bit of jazz influence. Tracks like Sophisticated Lady, She's a Different Lady, and I've Got Love on My Mind showed off her versatility. One minute she was playful and sassy, the next she was deep and vulnerable. Audiences ate it up. Critics, too. She was stacking gold and platinum records like it was nothing. But here's the thing. Man, even with all that success, Natalie was still fighting for recognition. The industry couldn't stop comparing her to Aretha Franklin. Every time Natalie put out a song, people were like, okay, but how does it stack up to Aretha? That's unfair pressure, right? It's like being compared to Michael Jordan every time you pick up a basketball. Natalie respected Aretha, but she wasn't trying to be her, she was trying to be Natalie. Still, those comparisons followed her everywhere, almost like a shadow she couldn't shake. And speaking of shadows, let's not forget the ghost of her father. Nat King Cole's presence was always hovering. Fans wanted her to honor him, but Natalie resisted doing tributes early on. She didn't want to ride his coattails. She wanted to prove she could build her own empire. That independence, that stubborn streak, it was both her greatest strength and one of her biggest struggles. Another thing that made Natalie stand out was her stage presence. Man, when she performed live, she didn't just sing, she connected. She had this natural charisma, this ability to make you feel like she was singing right to you. Fans used to say she had that same classy aura as her father, but with a funky, modern twist. She'd walk out in stylish gowns or sharp outfits, owning the stage with confidence. Whether it was a small club or a big concert hall, she commanded the room. By the late 70 seconds, Natalie Cole was a household name. She was on magazine covers, TV shows, and award stages. She was living that superstar life, fame, fortune, adoration. But as we'll see, all that glitter came with cracks underneath. The pressure of constant comparison, the demands of touring, and the industry's relentless expectations started to weigh heavy. Still, let's give credit where it's due. That first wave of Natalie's career showed the world that she wasn't just Nat's daughter. She was a powerhouse in her own right. She had carved out a lane in R&B and soul that was distinctly hers. Her hits weren't just songs, they were moments, the kind of tracks that made people dance, fall in love, cry, remember. And yet, as bright as those lights were, there was always that nagging question hanging over her. Would she ever be seen as truly equal to the legends of her time? Or would she always be just a step behind, underrated despite the fire she brought to the mic? Man, that tension between her success and the lack of full recognition is what makes her story so compelling. Natalie Cole's career rise wasn't just about topping charts. It was about fighting to be seen, to be respected, and to stand tall in her own name. By the time the 80 seconds rolled in, Natalie Cole had already proven she was no one-hit wonder. But man, the game was changing fast. Disco had burned out, R&B was evolving, and pop was starting to dominate radio in ways nobody had seen before. For Natalie, the late 70 seconds had been a whirlwind hit: records, non-stop tours, fame at her fingertips. But behind the scenes, cracks were forming. We'll get to that in the struggles section. For now, let's talk about how she managed to flip the script and keep her star shining in a new decade. In the early 80 seconds, Natalie was searching for that next big spark. She didn't want to fade out like so many artists of the 70 seconds. And man, she pulled it off. She released Everlasting in 1987, and that project marked a whole new chapter. The album had hits like Jumpstart, I Live for Your Love, and of course, Pink Cadillac. Now, Pink Cadillac was wild. It was originally a Bruce Springsteen track, but Natalie took it, put her own funky spin on it, and turned it into a dance floor favorite. That move showed the world she wasn't stuck in one lane. She could flip rock into R&B flavor and make it work. And let's not sleep on Dangerous, 1,985, and Good to Be Back, 1,989. Those records had cuts that reminded people Natalie wasn't just coasting. She was still hungry, still creative, still determined to hold her own in an industry that wasn't always kind to black women artists, trying to balance soul and mainstream pop. Miss You Like Crazy from Good to Be Back became one of her signature ballads, heartfelt, powerful, the kind of song that hits you right in the chest when you're going through heartbreak. That track alone showed Natalie could still compete with the big pop ballads of the 80 seconds. Her success in this period wasn't just about the charts, though. It was about survival. Remember, y'all, the 80 seconds music industry was ruthless. New stars like Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, and Anita Baker were dominating. And here was Natalie, someone who'd already been through one wave of fame, proving she could adapt and still matter in this crowded, competitive space. That took guts. That took resilience. Live performances in this era also kept her brand strong. Natalie had this uncanny ability to mix elegance with fire. She could walk on stage in a sequined gown, sing a heart-melting ballad, and then turn around and electrify the crowd with a funky up-tempo track. That versatility made her concerts unforgettable. She wasn't just giving you a show, she was giving you her life, pouring out every ounce of energy and emotion she had. Looking back, the late 80 seconds really set the stage for the ultimate breakthrough that was about to come. Natalie was regaining momentum, reconnecting with audiences, and preparing to take one of the boldest steps any artist could imagine, reaching back into her father's legendary catalog and creating something that would stun the world. The world thought they knew Natalie Cole by now. They thought she was a talented daughter carrying the torch, staying afloat in a crowded music scene. But she was about to do something nobody else had ever dared to try, a move that would define her legacy forever. So check this out, it's 1,991. Natalie Cole has already weathered the ups and downs of the 70 seconds and 80 seconds. She's had the hits, the setbacks, the comebacks. But now, she was ready to swing for the fences. And man, she did it with one project, unforgettable, with love. This wasn't just another record. This was Natalie stepping into the sacred territory of her father's music. Remember, for years, she had resisted being boxed in as Nat King Cole's daughter. She wanted to be her own artist, to carve her own lane. But now, with maturity and confidence, she decided it was time to honor her father on her terms. Unforgettable, with Love was more than a tribute album. It was an act of healing, a love letter, and honestly, a musical miracle. Natalie re-recorded some of Nat King Cole's most iconic songs, Mona Lisa, Route 66, Straighten Up and Fly Right, but the centerpiece, the jaw-dropper, was the title track, Unforgettable. Through studio technology, she created a duet with her late father. Nat's warm baritone mixed with Natalie's soulful elegance, it was haunting, beautiful, and emotional beyond words. For listeners, it felt like time folded in on itself, like father and daughter were reunited across decades. When that song hit the airwaves, man, it shook people. Fans cried, Critics were stunned. The industry took notice. This wasn't a gimmick, it was authentic. It was heartfelt. And it reminded the world just how powerful Natalie's voice really was. She wasn't just echoing her father's legacy, she was extending it. The album went crazy. It sold over 7 million copies worldwide, topping charts in multiple countries. In an era when R&B singers were fighting to cross over, Natalie blew through every barrier. And the Grammys? Oh, she cleaned house. In 1992, she took home 7 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year, Record of the Year, and Best Traditional Pop Performance. That night wasn't just a celebration of Natalie Cole, it was a recognition that her voice, her artistry, deserved to stand right next to the greats. But here's the kicker. Even with all that success, Natalie still didn't always get the same props as her peers. People loved the album, sure, but some critics tried to frame it like her biggest moment only came because of her father's music. That's unfair, man. Natalie had already proven herself with a decade and a half of hits. Unforgettable. With Love wasn't about riding coattails, it was about reclaiming her family's story, turning grief into beauty, and reminding the world of her versatility. And think about the courage it took. She risked being accused of exploiting her dad's legacy. She risked comparisons that could have crushed her. Instead, she pulled it off flawlessly, creating one of the most unforgettable literally albums of the 90 seconds. That project didn't just revive her career, it solidified her legend. It showed the world that Natalie Cole wasn't just a survivor. She was a transformer, someone who could take pain, history, and memory and spin it into pure gold. For every spotlight that shined on Natalie Cole, there was a shadow following her close behind. And in the late 70 seconds and early 80 seconds, those shadows started to swallow her whole. Behind the glitz, the gowns, and the Grammys, Natalie was fighting a demon that so many artists of her time knew all too well. Addiction. It started subtle, like it always does. Touring was exhausting, the pressure was insane, and the comparisons never stopped. To take the edge off, Natalie turned to drugs, first dabbling, then spiraling. Her drug of choice? Heroin, and later, crack cocaine. And man, once that grip tightened, it was brutal. At her peak, Natalie was blowing through thousands of dollars a week on drugs. She would disappear from friends and family, missing shows, skipping out on responsibilities. That golden voice? Sometimes it was too strung out to even make it to the stage. And the crazy part is, fans didn't always know. She'd still show up in dazzling gowns, makeup flawless, but behind closed doors she was crumbling. Her relationship suffered too. Natalie was married 3 times, and her addictions burned bridges with the people closest to her. Friends tried to intervene, but when you're in that deep, man, it's hard to see the way out. She later admitted in interviews that she wasn't just hurting herself, she was breaking the hearts of everyone who loved her. By the early 80 seconds, the industry had started to whisper. Natalie Cole, the Grammy-winning daughter of Nat King Cole, was becoming more famous for her drug use than her records. That's the cruel part of fame. People love to watch the rise, but the fall? That's the part the tabloids eat alive. Natalie found herself plastered in headlines, not for her music, but for her scandals. And let's be real, addiction is expensive in more ways than one. Natalie's finances took a major hit. At one point, she was so strapped for cash that she pawned her jewelry just to feed her habit. Imagine that a woman who once filled arenas now pawning her own possessions just to survive the next fix. Her health started breaking down, too. Drugs stripped weight off her body, weakened her immune system, and left her fragile. She admitted later that she narrowly escaped death more than once. It's wild to think that in the same years she was winning awards and stacking hits, she was also dancing on the edge of life and death. But here's the part that makes Natalie's story so powerful. She didn't let that be the end. By the mid-80 seconds, she realized she couldn't keep running from herself. With the help of rehab, faith, and the sheer will to live, she began the slow, painful climb back to sobriety. She went to treatment not once, but multiple times, fighting relapse after relapse. Each attempt was a war against her cravings, against her past, against the voice that told her she wasn't good enough. Natalie later said in her autobiography that drugs were her way of coping with pain. She never really dealt with the loss of her father, the pressure of fame, the loneliness of always being the daughter of. That honesty made her relatable. She wasn't just a diva on a pedestal. She was human, broken, and clawing her way back like so many others. The cost of addiction? It almost destroyed her career, her relationships, and her body. But surviving it gave Natalie Cole a new kind of power, the kind that comes from walking through fire and somehow coming out alive. And that survival, messy and painful as it was, set her up for one of the most inspiring comebacks in music history. So here's the thing, man. Even after Natalie Cole fought her way out of addiction, her body never really forgot. Years of drug use left scars that came back to haunt her later. And those scars? They showed up in the form of serious health problems that would define her final years. In the early 2000s, Natalie was diagnosed with hepatitis C, a disease she contracted from sharing needles back in her darkest days. She spoke openly about it, admitting that her past choices had caught up with her. That honesty? It was heartbreaking and brave. Hepatitis C doesn't play around. It attacks the liver, weakens the body, and in Natalie's case, it led to major complications. By 2008, things got real serious. Her kidneys were failing. She had to go on dialysis several times a week just to stay alive. Imagine that this glamorous, world-famous singer, once dazzling on stages around the globe, now hooked up to machines, fighting just to keep her body functioning. She needed a kidney transplant, and thankfully, she got one in 2009. But even with that, the toll on her health was massive. Natalie tried to keep going, though. That's the thing about her, she was a fighter. She still performed, still recorded, still showed up for fans even when her body was begging her to slow down. She'd hit the stage looking radiant, but behind the scenes she was battling fatigue, weakness, and pain. That resilience? Man, it made her fans love her even more. She was proof that you could be fragile and strong at the same time. But the hits just kept coming. After the transplant, she faced complications. Her doctors put her on heavy medications to prevent organ rejection, and those meds messed with her lungs. In interviews, she admitted that even breathing sometimes felt like a struggle. That's a cruel fate for someone whose life revolved around her voice, her breath, her ability to fill a room with sound. Still, Natalie didn't hide. She went public about her health battles, using her platform to raise awareness about hepatitis C and organ donation. She wanted her pain to help somebody else. She wanted her story to be bigger than just tragedy. She wanted it to be a testimony. Then came the 31st of December 2015. Natalie Cole passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 65. The cause was congestive heart failure, tied directly to her decades of health issues. The news hit fans hard. New Year's Eve is supposed to be a night of celebration, but that year it felt heavy. We had lost not just a singer, but a survivor. A woman who had walked through fire and sung through tears. Her death sparked tributes from all over the world. Fellow artists, from Smokey Robinson to Aretha Franklin, praised her strength and her voice. Fans flooded social media with memories of her songs, the first dance at their wedding, the heartbreak song that got them through a breakup, the unforgettable duet that made them cry with their parents. It was proof that Natalie Cole's impact stretched way beyond the charts. But man, the sad part is, even in death, she didn't always get the recognition she deserved. News outlets covered her passing, sure, but it wasn't the media storm you'd expect for someone of her caliber. That's the sting of being underrated. Natalie gave the world decades of music, won 9 Grammys, sold millions of records, and still, she often felt like she was in the shadow of others. Her final years were marked by pain, but they were also marked by courage. Natalie Cole faced her demons, her diseases, and her mortality with a kind of grace that's rare. She didn't pretend to be perfect. She showed us her scars. And in doing that, she reminded us that legends aren't flawless, they're human. Natalie Cole's career was more than just a collection of hits. It was proof that artistry can evolve, survive, and inspire across generations. Her influence can still be felt in the way singers blend genres today. She never stuck to one lane, man. From the soulful R&B of This Will Be, to the glossy pop of Pink Cadillac, to the jazz elegance of Unforgettable. With Love, Natalie showed that an artist could reinvent themselves without losing authenticity. That's huge. For young singers, especially black women coming up in the industry, Natalie's career was a blueprint. She showed you didn't have to be trapped by one label or one expectation. You could be soulful, you could be jazzy, you could even dip into pop rock if you wanted and still be respected. Artists like Alicia Keys, Jennifer Hudson, And even Janelle Monáe owes something to that versatility Natalie championed. Her voice, man, that was the real instrument. It wasn't just about power, it was about emotion. She could hit you with playful joy on This Will Be, and everlasting love, and then break your heart wide open with Miss You Like Crazy. That range of feeling influenced how singers approach ballads and up-tempo tracks alike. It wasn't just about showing off pipes, it was about telling stories with sound. And of course, there's the cultural weight of Unforgettable. That father-daughter duet is one of the most iconic moments in modern music. It opened doors for how technology could be used to connect generations, and it's been referenced in pop culture ever since. More than that, it gave fans a healing moment, a chance to witness love between a father and daughter that death couldn't erase. That's bigger than music. That's legacy. But Natalie's influence wasn't only about sound. It was also about resilience. Her story of falling into addiction, fighting her way back, and still delivering some of her best work afterward, that inspired countless people. She wasn't ashamed to tell the truth about her struggles, and by doing that, she gave hope to folks dealing with their own demons. In a way, her legacy is about more than notes and lyrics. It's about survival, honesty, and grace under fire. And let's not forget how she carried her father's name with dignity. She didn't let it define her, but she didn't run from it either. Instead, she wove it into her art when she was ready. That balance of honoring the past while building her own future is a lesson for any artist trying to step out of a giant shadow. At the end of the day, Natalie Cole influenced not just what we hear in music, but how we feel it. She taught us that music could be both timeless and evolving, rooted in tradition but reaching for new horizons. And that, my friends, is the kind of impact that doesn't fade. Here's the wild thing, man. For all the Grammys, platinum records, and iconic performances, Natalie Cole never quite got her flowers the way she deserved. People respected her, no doubt. They loved her voice. They bought her records. But when folks start naming the greatest, the divas, the queens of soul, the legends of pop, Natalie's name too often gets left out of the conversation. And that's crazy when you think about it. Part of it comes down to timing. Natalie came up in the 70 seconds, right when Aretha Franklin was already crowned the Queen of Soul. Then the 80 seconds hit, and Whitney Houston stormed the scene with a once-in-a-generation powerhouse voice. Add Diana Ross, Anita Baker, Chaka Khan, the lane was crowded, and Natalie sometimes got treated like she was in the second row, even when she was dropping songs that stood toe-to-toe with all of them. Then there was the shadow of her father. Don't get it twisted, honoring Nat King Cole was beautiful, but for critics, it created this trap. They'd say her biggest achievement was tied to her dad's music. Like, come on. Natalie had a decade of hits before Unforgettable, with Love. She proved herself long before that. But some folks still framed her as the daughter keeping the legacy alive rather than a legend in her own right. That label of Nat's daughter never fully faded, and it robbed her of some recognition she earned with sweat, tears, and talent. And let's be real, her struggles with drugs and health also shaped how people saw her. The media loves a comeback story, but they also love to reduce artists to their scandals. Natalie was brutally honest about her demons, but that honesty sometimes overshadowed the artistry. Instead of being remembered solely for her insane catalog of music, she often got reduced to the narrative of survival. Important, yes, but limiting too. Yet here's the truth. Natalie Cole was every bit as deserving of the top-tier spotlight as her peers. She wasn't just a great singer, she was a shapeshifter who could glide between R&B, jazz, pop, and soul with ease. She kept her career alive through multiple decades, something not many artists can say. And that duet with her father? It's one of the most unforgettable moments in music history, period. So when we talk about underrated, it's not just about numbers or awards. It's about respect. Natalie didn't always get the same cultural weight as Whitney, Aretha, or Diana, even though her talent was undeniable. But maybe that's why her fans ride so hard for her, because they know, deep down, she deserved better. Today, her legacy lives in the voices of artists she inspired, in the playlists that keep her hits alive, and in the stories people tell about how her songs touched their lives. Natalie Cole may have been underrated by the industry, but to those who felt her music in their bones, she was, and always will be, unforgettable. From the moment she was born, Natalie Cole carried a legacy bigger than most people could imagine. She was Nat King Cole's daughter, the child of one of the most beloved voices in American history. But here's the thing, man. She didn't just live in his shadow. She built her own light. Through the highs, the lows, the victories, and the pain, Natalie carved out a story that was uniquely hers. Think about it. She started as this young woman who everyone thought would simply follow in her father's footsteps, singing the old standards. Instead, she came out swinging in the 70 seconds with songs like This Will Be and Inseparable, proving she was her own force. She reinvented herself in the 80 seconds, showing the world she could adapt, evolve, and still own the stage. And then in the 90 seconds, she pulled off one of the boldest moves in music history, duetting with her late father on Unforgettable. That moment alone could have been enough to cement her legacy, but for Natalie, it was just another chapter in a life of resilience. But of course, her story wasn't all sunshine. The addiction, the broken relationships, the health battles, those struggles made her human. They showed us that even the brightest stars can have cracks. And instead of hiding it, Natalie faced it head on. She told the truth, she fought her demons, and she let the world see her scars. That honesty is part of why people still connect with her today. Now here's the question I've got to throw out to y'all. Should Natalie Cole be remembered alongside the absolute greats Aretha, Whitney, Diana, all those iconic names? Or did the industry cheat her out of her rightful place at the top? That's the debate, man. That's where the underrated part of her story stings the most. Because when you listen to her voice, the emotion, the elegance, the versatility, you can't help but wonder why her name doesn't come up more often when people talk about the greatest singers of all time. What can't be denied is the impact she left behind. Natalie Cole gave us joy, gave us healing, gave us music that will live forever. She carried her father's spirit with her, but she also gave the world herself. And that, my friends, is unforgettable. So as we close this chapter, let's not let her legacy fade into the background. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What's your favorite Natalie Cole song? Do you think she got the respect she deserved? Let's give her the flowers she might not have always gotten in her lifetime. Natalie Cole may have left this earth in 2015, but her voice, her resilience, her spirit, they're still with us. And no matter how underrated the world might have called her, to those who really listened she was, and forever will be, unforgettable.